Welcome to another edition of Exotic Gardening UK Yorkshire Kris Weekly. I'm standing at the end of the garden and behind me is my Germination gigantea bamboo, and you may have noticed it looks a bit battered, a bit worse for wear, and that's not really because of the winter or the winds at this point in the garden, because it can stand up to them pretty well normally. It's because this bamboo unfortunately is flowering. Probably started flowering last year, but now the whole plant is completely covered in flowers or starting to flower, and the bamboo is putting all its energy into flowering, which means it's not really trying to grow well. The leaves are looking a bit discoloured and they're not getting replaced like they normally are. And with this species of bamboo, it usually means, I believe, that it will die, so it'll carry on flowering all this year, and if I left it, it'll probably grow a bit but then look worse and worse, flower for a couple of years and then die over the next few years, which means I've got a decision to make. I can either leave it like this and make it and let it look worse and worse over the next season or two, or I can cut it down now and plant something else in its place. So what I'm going to do is leave it, and when I have my open day people can see what the bamboo looks like when it's flowering, and then over next winter I will remove it, and I've got lots and lots of thick strong canes that I can use in the garden. Anyway, so that's not the best bit of news for this bamboo in my garden, and it does mean that this species, if you've got it in your garden, probably will flower in the next year or two as well, because they do seem to flower around the world at the same time. It will have seeds and they will grow new bamboos, but that might take 15-20 years to get to a plant this large again, so we'll replace it with something else eventually. Anyway, coming up in the rest of today's episode. As you can see, after just a few days, the canna seeds have already started to germinate. So I'll pop these up into pots of multi-purpose compost and perlite now, and then they'll grow away over the next few months before planting out in June. After less than a week, the celosia seeds, the Prince of Wales feathers, have already germinated. And also all the zinnia seeds have also all germinated as well. These took only 2 days. And here is my fuchsia boliviana that has flowered and now fruited, and the berries are actually edible but they don't taste that nice, so I'm going to let these ripen and then sow the seeds. As we approach the last week of March and the weather's looking pretty good and settled for the next few weeks in the forecast, I've took the plunge and removed all the straw coverings from the beds where the colocasias, some cannas and dahlias are, and the begonias. So as you can see, most of the material's being removed. It looks quite bare at the moment, but you can see by the side of the path there loads of red stems sticking up, and they're the colocasias. And I've removed the covers from the rest of the beds in this second half of the garden as well, and let's have a look at what's growing. So down here you can see these are all the pink china colocasias. A few of the leaves are snapped off that were growing when I removed the straw and with the winds as well, but they'll soon recover. and we will get frost over the next month or so, and that'll set them back a little bit, but it's better to give them some air now and uncover them than to leave them under the straw for much longer, where all the snails and slugs, now they're active and it's warmer, would eat away at the colocasias anyway. So it's good to uncover them now. You can see they're starting to grow new leaves already. And we've also got gingers as well. So here's a Hedychium greenii. They can see the rhizome there, and the new shoots will form in the sides of this rhizome. And just over here we have the Lobelia tupa, which is growing away strongly already. There's absolutely loads of shoots of this all over now, so there should be a good display of brick red to orange flowers later in summer. And over here we have the Amesia zygomaris, which is a very tall growing member of the pea family with leaves that collapse each evening and has yellow pea-like flowers. Anyway, this is looking dormant at the moment, but there are signs of life. We've got a leaf just starting over here, very tiny, you can hardly see it. And this is a good time to propagate this plant, because all these old stems, if I sort of loosen one and pull that away, a little bit of root would come with it, and I could pop that up and it would grow a new plant. You can actually see just down there, look, some new growth just starting there. It'll be a few weeks before this really gets going, but then by mid-May it'll be as tall as me. Over here we have some cannas. This is Canna alistanii. You can see it's got a new shoot already trying to grow there, and many more will form all over this area. It's quite a large plant. I could divide this, and this is also the species that I'm growing from seed. Down by the jungle hut I have a nice Aloe Polyphylla, and that was only planted out last year. It's quite a small specimen, but as you can see, completely untouched by winter. It's looking good, nice and compact, nice and green, no damage on that at all, and that just had a piece of plastic over the top of it. And it is sheltered partly by the jungle hut just above it on this edge as well. So that will remain uncovered now for the rest of the season, unless it gets really cold, but I doubt that will happen. Let's have a look at the bigger brother of this one. Now here's a much bigger Polyphylla. It's almost, but probably is now, flowering size. We might get flowers on that this year. But I've got an issue with where it's growing, because it's getting a bit crowded by the phormia, which I will move soon anyway, but also by the big jabea. If I move upwards, you can see the jabea leaves are growing over this, so it's got a bit of shade. So I might have to cut off the lower leaves of the jabea just to give it a bit more light here. But that's come through, is that 4 winters in the ground now, which is fantastic for this plant. It's not always easy to grow outside, but I seem to have found a spot which it likes. Just had a plastic sheet over the top of this during the last few months. Here's another interesting plant that's waking up. This is Podophyllum spotty-dotty. These really interesting sort of like lizard-like texture on the leaves, and they're really interesting shaped leaves as well. These will have daisy-like flowers later in the year, but it's the leaves that we grow it for. As you can see, loads of new leaves ready to unfurl there as well. Likes moist shade. It's got this irrigation underneath to keep this nice and moist. It's definitely in a shady spot, but it's also in a spot that's easily overlooked, so I may move this to a more prominent position pretty soon. And it's not just the bamboos that have decided to flower. This Melianthus honey bush is also ready to flower. You can see the big flower bud there, and it will open up into large, long red, brick red, pinkish flowers. And it makes the plant look a bit unsightly overall because it gets a bit more shrubby and straggly, but the flowers are interesting for a while, so I will let this flower. and the whole plant is looking good because it's been a pretty mild winter. But I might cut this back after flowering if it does look a bit straggly. Now you may remember from last year where I did a good video comparing the two types of commonly grown gunneras. Well, this is Gunnera tinctoria. It's got its new leaves just starting now. Very rough leaves with these reddish, pink reddish veins down the centre. And this contrasts with the Gunnera manicata, which is also growing in another part of the garden. And this is the Gunnera manicata, which has more rounder leaves once they've developed. And also has a green rather than reddish veins on the centres here as well. And this will grow much larger than the tinctoria. And the tinctoria, just to remind you, is also on the list of invasive species, and it's no longer allowed to be sold in the EU and the UK, but manicata can be. So all these arid plants you can see in these terracotta pots, I have brought these outside now, and they have been in the garage all winter, completely unheated, so it's been pretty cold in there when we've had the coldest nights outside. And they've all come through totally fine, no damage on these this year, which is great to see, because some of these are not the hardiest of things. And because it's a pretty cloudy day, and the last few days have been cloudy, I put these in an area where they won't get full sun, and these will just sort of acclimatise to conditions. They're still pretty dry. I've not watered these for, well, I had a little bit of water over winter, once or twice, but they're pretty dry at the moment, and I won't water these now unless it doesn't rain for a few weeks. And these will just acclimatise to being outside in the fresh air. And then by the time the sun gets stronger, they'll be ready to go in the full sun position that they'll like, and they'll be regularly watered, and will make a nice display this summer. There's all sorts down here. There's cacti, there's aloes, we have agaves like these here, and we've got this nice cross here of this aeonium, which is a cross between Schwarzkopf and Simsii. I know I've pronounced that wrong, but it's a nice cross. It's got some hardiness about it, but I'm not taking any chances. And back there we've got a large puntier pad, which hopefully will grow some further pads this summer as it's rooted nicely in this bowl. And finally, here we have the loquat tree that I moved just a few weeks back in a previous episode. And as you can see lots of new growth, lots of new pale leaves forming here. So it's doing okay in its new position in the garden. So thank you for watching this edition of Exotic Gardening UK Yorkshire Kris Weekly. Join me next week where I'll be sowing more seeds and doing more jobs in the garden.